Welcome to episode 39 in our series on Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto's The Path of the Just, and we are up to chapter 23, and this chapter deals with how we can acquire humility. The last chapter dealt with the virtues of humility. Here we are instructed in the ways to acquire it. So the Ramchal begins. There are two factors that accustom one to humility: habit and contemplation. Habit means that a person gradually adapts a lowly manner of behavior, as previously discussed, by sitting in a low place, by walking behind a group he is with, and by dressing modestly. This means dressing respectably, yet avoiding fancy clothing. When one habituates himself in this manner, then, step by step, the virtue of humility will become internalized within him until it becomes permanently established. Since the nature of man's heart is to swell and be filled with conceit, it is difficult for him to completely uproot this natural inclination without employing the external actions that are within his control. Gradually, these will work to effect an internal change, something that is not very much within his control. This is similar to what we explained concerning the virtue of alacrity, all of which is contained in the statement of our sages of blessed memory, and he quotes from Barachot 17a. A person should always be astute when fearing the eternal, which means that one should use subterfuge in his struggle, I guess that means cunning, in his struggle against man's nature and its tendencies until he wins out. And now the Ramchal is going to bring and examine the Mishnah brought by Akavia ben Mahalalel in Pirkei Avos, or Ethics of Our Fathers, chapter 3, Mishnah 1. So the Ramchal continues. Contemplation, however, relates to various matters. The first one is mentioned in the words of Akavia ben Mahalalel, and he quotes from Pirkei Avos 3:1, "Know from where you came, from a putrid drop, and where you are heading, to a place of dust, worms, and maggots, and before whom you are destined to give an accounting, before the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He." Undeniably, all of these stand in opposition to haughtiness and promote humility. And he analyzes this, the Mishnah, the Pirkei Avos Mishnah, and he quotes from it, "Know from where you came." When a person observes his lowly state of corporeality and his inferior beginnings, he has absolutely no reason to be conceited. Instead, he should be ashamed and embarrassed. To what is this analogous? To a herdsman of pigs who rise to power. As long as he remembers his former days, he cannot become haughty. And the quotation from the Mishnah, "and where you are heading." And when he considers as well that at the end of all his great endeavors he will return to the dust, food for the maggots, his pride will surely be subdued and his unbridled haughtiness will be forgotten. For what value is there in the good and the greatness that he has acquired when in the end shame and embarrassment prevail? Now the Ramchal is going to describe our accountability before God. Please God, after 120 years, when we have to face God, and how this will appear to us, and how we should keep this kind of mindset and kind of thought experiments within our minds. So the Ramchal continues. And when he reflects further and imagines the moment of his entry into the great court of the heavenly legions, seeing himself before the King of all kings, the Holy One, blessed be He, holy and pure, to the ultimate degree of holiness and purity, in the midst of the holy ones, servants of strength, mighty warriors who do his bidding, who have no blemish, and he stands before them, deficient, lowly, and denigrated by his very nature, impure and defiled on account of his deeds. Will he dare to raise his head? Will he be able to justify himself? And if they ask him, "What have you to say? Where is the pride and honor that you bore in your world?" what will the answer be? How will he respond when rebuked in this manner? Surely, if a person would for just one moment visualize this truth in his mind, portray it realistically and vividly, all of his haughtiness would vanish, never to return. Now the Ramchal is going to describe the changing realities of the world and how situations change, and how really in reality nothing ever stays the same. It's almost a fight just to keep something constant. Or as someone once said, the only constant in this world is change. So the Ramchal continues. The second area worthy of contemplation relates to the shifting circumstances that result from the changing times. A wealthy person can easily become poor, a ruler can turn into a slave, and an honored person can fall into disgrace. Thus, if one can so quickly be reduced to a state where he finds so shameful today, how can he be prideful when his own situation is at risk? So many different diseases can, heaven forbid, befall a person and make him personally plead for someone to help him, assist him, and ease his plight a little. And he may have to endure much suffering, heaven forbid, which will compel him to appeal for help from people to whom he had shown disdain in greeting. And we see these things laid day in and day out. They should surely be sufficient to remove a person's haughtiness from his heart and to clothe him in humility and lowliness. Now, the Ramchal is going to describe the third focus of contemplation, which is neglect of one's responsibility towards the eternal and its pitfalls. The Ramchal continues, and when one further reflects upon his duty towards the Blessed One, and his neglectfulness and laxity in this sphere, without doubt he will be ashamed rather than haughty, embarrassed rather than prideful. Similarly, it says in Yirmiyahu chapter 31 verse 17, I have heard Ephraim lamenting. After having repented I have regret, and after having been aware I smacked my hand on my thigh. I am ashamed and embarrassed. And now Ramchal describes the fourth area of contemplation, contemplating the foibles of the human mind. Ramchal continues, and above all else, one must constantly engage in contemplation in order to apprehend the weakness of the human mind and the many errors and fallacies it is subject to, for it is more prone to embrace error than to acquire true knowledge. Therefore, one should always be afraid of this danger, and he should always try to learn from all people and listen to advice, lest he fail. This is what our sages of blessed memory have said in Pirkei Avos chapter 4, Mishnah 1. Who is a wise person? One who learns from all people. Similarly, King Solomon said in Proverbs 12:15, one who takes advice is wise. Now the Ramchal is going to describe overindulgence in the good things of this world and how it leads to the loss of humility. So the Ramchal continues, the factors that lead to the loss of virtue are extravagance and overindulgence regarding the good things of this world, as stated explicitly in Deuteronomy 8 verse 12. So that it will not happen when you eat and you are satisfied, that you become conceited. For this reason, those who are pious have found that it is beneficial for a person to sometimes afflict himself in order to humble the evil inclination of haughtiness, since it only succeeds in strengthening itself through excess. This is similar to what they of blessed memory have said in Brachot 32a. A lion does not roar over a basket of straw, but over a basket of meat. However, the primary factors leading to the loss of this virtue are foolishness and a lack of true knowledge, for you will observe that haughtiness is proportional to a person's foolishness. Our rabbis of blessed memory have said, and he quotes from Kiddushim 49b, poverty in matters of Torah is an indication of arrogance. Similarly, they said, and this comes from Zohar on Balak 193 verse 2, an indication of a person's ignorance is self-praise. And they also said in Baba Metzia 85b, one coin in a jug makes a lot of noise. They also said in Bereshis Rabbah 16.3, the fruitless trees were asked, what are your "Why are your voices heard?" And they answered, "If only our voices would be heard and we would be remembered." And we have already seen that Moshe, who was selected above all other men, was also the humblest of men. Also included amongst those factors that lead to the loss of humility is being associated with or being served by flatterers. These people will mislead a person with their flattery for their own benefit and will praise and exalt that person by magnifying to the maximum the virtues that he possesses and by attributing to him what he does not possess at all. And sometimes what they attribute to him is the opposite of what he really possesses. In the final analysis, the human mind is pliant, and man's nature is weak and easily influenced. And this is particularly true in regard to something toward which he is naturally inclined. Therefore, when one hears these words coming from someone who he trusts, they penetrate him like like the venom of an enraged snake, and he finds himself ensnared in a net of haughtiness and is broken or succumbs. A case in point is Yoash, who acted righteously during all the days he was being instructed by Yehoyada HaKohen, his teacher. But after the death of Yehoyada, his servants came and began to flatter him and to magnify his praise, to the extent of deifying him. That's from Shemot Rabbah 8:2. Then the king gave heed to them. That's from Divrei Hamim 24:17. And you can see this quite clearly. The majority of nobles or kings, and for that matter all people who are in a position of power, whatever their stature, falter and are corrupted by the flattery of their subordinates. That's so true. Many people in power have a lot of yes men or yes people around them, and they can inflate their egos to such an extent that they become absolute toys of these corruptful flatterers. Now the Ramchal describes how one must take care in choosing friends and their associates. The Ramchal continues and concludes his chapter. Therefore, anyone with eyes in his head should exercise more caution and scrutiny regarding the actions of anyone whom he sees as a friend or an advisor or as a custodian of his household, than he exercises in relation to his food or drink. For food and drink can only harm him physically, while friends or custodians can corrupt his soul, his strength, and his honor. King David said in Psalms 101, "He who walks in the path of innocence, he shall serve me. In my house shall not dwell one who acts deceitfully." And there is nothing better for a person than to seek honest friends who will shed light where he is blind and will rebuke him with love, and thereby they will save him from all evil. For what a person cannot see due to his inability to censure himself, they will see and understand, and they will caution him, and he will be protected. Referring to this, it has been stated in Proverbs 24:6, salvation comes through much counsel. So that concludes this chapter, fantastic chapter on how to acquire humility from all aspects, from the external presentation of ourselves through our clothes and our position when we walk and such like, through to which company we keep, and also how we view ourselves and how we view our future. We must take a few steps back in our mind and assess ourselves and keep ourselves far from arrogance, because none of us deserve to be arrogant in any way. We've done nothing in order to be arrogant or proud about something. So in the next episode we're going to step up another rung of this metaphysical ladder, and chapter 24 is going to deal with the fear of sin and how we must bring this about in ourselves.